Hi, I'm Laura, founder of Fertility Avenue, providing emotional and physical support to women who are on a difficult fertility journey. Today, I am so excited to welcome somebody truly special to the podcast series, Melissa, a hypnotherapist who works deeply with women and men on a range of issues. Melissa, a warm welcome to you. It's so good to have you here with me today.
Oh, thank you, Laura. I'm excited to be here and talk to you today about what your work in helping women on their
Absolutely.
journey.
Oh, thank you for coming along. So I think a really good place for our listeners to start with today is to start really from the very beginning.
Mm.
Would you mind, Melissa, just talking about what is hypnotherapy exactly? Because I know that there are quite a few misconceptions, should we say, floating around out there. So I think it's really good for our listeners to really just understand what hypnotherapy means and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing to sort of distinguish between is hypnosis and hypnotherapy. So if you were to stop somebody in the street and ask them about hypnotherapy, their minds would almost certainly go to stage hypnosis.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Classic, classic thing. And obviously, in that instance, you're using hypnosis for entertainment.
Hmm.
What we're doing with hypnotherapy is obviously using hypnosis for therapy. So, because people normally jump to that misconception, then they also have a lot of other misconceptions. So, that they're going to be made to do something silly.
Out of their control. Yeah.
Exactly. They're giving up their free will, etc. So, what I often say to people is that when you think about what's happening on stage, that's a fantastic demonstration of the power of somebody's mind,
Uh-huh.
not the power of the hypnotist.
Right. Absolutely.
And because actually hypnosis is about free will, it's not about giving up free will. It's a decision that you make whether you want to go into hypnosis or not. And I guess another misconception is that you can be made to do that and do something, but absolutely you will not. If you don't want to go into hypnosis consciously, it's not for you.
Yeah.
It's impossible
Yeah.
and unethical to sort of do that. So it really is about free will. It's being about being open-minded, etc.
And I guess it could be a bit like guided meditation with a sort of a specific therapeutic goal.
Yeah, I mean, I call it daydreaming with a purpose.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes.
we all experience this sort of hypnotic trance all the time in our daily lives. We
Hmm.
just don't call it that or recognize it. So there's two states of brainwave activity that we go into just before we fall asleep and just as we wake up that are actually the same brainwave activity that you see during hypnosis. So it's a
Yeah.
natural state. And if anybody's ever, which I imagine all of us have, experienced, drifting off, maybe
Yeah.
getting lost in a good book or a film,
Yeah, absolutely. That's
uh,
or
driving
sometimes even
somewhere.
driving somewhere and coming
Yeah,
home and thinking, I don't even remember
I
like
don't
my
know.
drive home. You're in that sort
Exactly.
of calming, meditative. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we call it a state of focused awareness or focused attention.
Hmm.
So your sort of conscious mind is doing something, but your subconscious
Which
mind is
is
somewhere
also
else.
on an, yeah.
And really, all we do in hypnotherapy is that we replicate that natural, normal state, and we just guide the person, the individual, into that state, and perhaps deepen it in some instances, so that we can kind of access the subconscious mind. So,
Yes.
really, what happens is your conscious mind just takes a little step aside for a minute. That gatekeeper that's really rational
Absolutely.
and
The normal rational brain. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. A little bit, kind of maybe locked down in its thinking.
Hmm.
And that just allows the subconscious mind to kind of step in and take
Take
a little
over.
bit more, yeah, control. And really, your subconscious mind is just much more open to positive change and
And
suggestion.
that's where the biggest change can happen, isn't it? When the
Exactly.
subconscious mind is allowed to
Exactly.
take over a little bit.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I know that there are going to be some people who are a bit curious, but still on the fence, not sure whether it's for them or not. Maybe they're a little bit scared. What would you perhaps say to somebody who's listening, who's still kind of wanting to dip their toes into it, maybe, possibly, but a little bit still skeptical about
Yeah.
hypnotherapy? What would you say to that?
I mean, first off, I would say excellent to be skeptical. You really
Yes.
should be. It's actually what your conscious mind is wired to do anyway, is to
Keeps
look
us safe,
at,
isn't it? Yeah.
be logical, yeah,
Yeah.
keep you safe. So like any therapy or any therapist that you work with, it's really important that you find someone that is trained and registered,
Hmm.
so that, if that's the first thing, is make sure
Yeah.
you don't just go to anybody. But really, most people's reference points, as we said before, is stage hypnosis or maybe their friend's brother's cousin. and they may have a story or something. So I think my first advice would be do a little bit more research,
Yes, absolutely.
widen your knowledge about what hypnotherapy
It
is and what it
is.
can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
A lot
And
of
do you have
people
to
don't
believe in it for it to work?
know.
No.
As long as you're open to change and the idea that change can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say on all of my feedback forms from most of my clients, when I ask them how did they feel before the session, they almost always say I was really skeptical.
Yeah.
I was skeptical that it would work. I was skeptical that I would be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was skeptical that change could happen. But when you scroll down then to the results and how they feel afterwards, they're just completely amazed
Amazing. So
at the
really
results.
it's if someone's open and curious about it, that's really all it takes. And then the rest of
Exactly,
the rest of the
exactly.
work's down to the hypnotherapist to make sure they're tapping into the right domains
That's
of their
exactly
client.
right. Yeah. And I think it's
Amazing.
still, for a lot of people, it's still sort of an emerging field, if you like. I don't think it's that kind of well
Commonly,
known.
yeah.
I would like it to be something that you go to the dentist regularly, you have a checkup, you go to the gym. Why not have a mind checkup
Hypnotherapy.
as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. Yeah, a mind MOT almost.
Yeah, exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
yeah, it should
And
be part of
actually,
everyone's daily practice, even just a normal office job, even just to
completely.
make sure your mind is in the right place to attend to
Yes,
that piece of work or that day's stress list or whatever it
exactly,
is.
exactly. And
And
there's
it can't do any harm, can we, for hypnotherapy? It's not
no,
good.
I
No.
mean, if it's done by, as I said, a registered trained
Yes,
professional
that's really
in a
important.
safe environment, there are some contraindications, there are some conditions, neurological, psychological conditions where you wouldn't be able to work with
No,
somebody with hypnotherapy, but that is all part of the safety training that we do, which is to make sure we're doing all that properly.
absolutely.
I think the other thing to let people know is that hypnotherapy is actually now being used by the NHS. So there are clinical hypnotherapists working in mind body conditions, so particularly IBS. There's a
Mhm.
protocol where that is a really, really clinically proven technique to help improve people who are
Just
struggling with IBS.
demonstrates
So
the power of
it's,
it. It's becoming more and more recognized now, I think,
yeah,
as
exactly that.
holistic therapies are becoming not so woo-woo, and people are
Yeah,
accepting that actually they do have a huge benefit.
that's right.
I
And I think
think.
you mentioned about, guided meditations. I think
Mm.
if someone is curious but still a little bit cautious, that would be a really good place to start. There's
Yes,
so
yeah,
many great online downloadable audios. You could just start listening to something like that, even not particularly hypnotherapy, but just a guided meditation, and start noticing how you feel,
uh-huh.
what happens in your mind. Are you imagining images, words, pictures, thoughts, feelings, etc.? And I
Yeah.
think once you start to experience that, then you can kind of see
See
really where
where the benefits
hypnotherapy
are.
can take you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know most of my listeners may be going on a difficult fertility journey, but before we actually home in specifically on fertility and how hypnotherapy links in with that, I just think, what other issues do you, as a general hypnotherapist, do you typically work with? What sort of, if you can just
Yeah.
summarize that.
I mean, essentially almost anything, to be
Yeah,
honest. If you think about it, because you're tapping into the subconscious, which is so much a part of the human experience, any human experience that you're having a challenge with, or even something you would like to improve, like a performance, like being on stage or an athlete, etc., you can use hypnotherapy to
for
work with.
anything. Yeah.
So
But
anything. I mean,
get into the
classic.
subconscious, it's you can then get to the root causes, can't you?
Exactly, exactly. I would say, obviously, anxiety is really prevalent at the moment.
Yes, yeah.
I see a lot of people with anxiety at different levels for different reasons. Stress obviously comes with that. Low
Trauma.
trauma, yeah. I mean, sleep issues,
Yeah,
simple things like phobias, but that can control someone's life. Something we
absolutely.
might think, why are you scared of that? But it can actually be paralyzing for some people. And limiting beliefs, obviously, is quite a big
Huge.
thing as well.
Yeah, but that's
Um,
going to lot of those areas do fit in with my fertility clients because it's not necessarily just about fertility and not being able to
yes,
fall pregnant. We'll pick up on this a little bit later, but it's what comes with it. As why there could be a block somewhere, and it could be
yes,
something
exactly.
completely not related to, in their minds, to fertility, but
Yeah,
something complete that's happened a while ago or a lifetime
100%.
ago,
Yeah,
something traumatic, some anxiety, and actually that's just not just. I wouldn't hate to say just the word just,
yeah,
but that could be the block.
holding it back, exactly. And I do
Absolutely.
find that often what clients come to me for in the first instance isn't actually what we end up
That's
working on.
talking. Yeah. It's a bit like when I do hypnotherapy, but more EFT with my clients.
Yes.
It's like unlayering that onion, and what they think they've come to me for actually ends up not very quickly not being the actual reason or the
Yes,
root cause. It's getting down to that root cause.
that's the
So,
key.
talking about root causes, can you just talk a little bit more about the connection between surface level symptoms and those deeper subconscious beliefs?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's helpful really to think of the conscious mind as being like the pilot.
Yeah,
The pilot flying the plane really only has to kind of cope with maybe 5 or 6 really important decisions. They're
hmm,
handling small things that are very important, but your subconscious mind is that autopilot, just kind of running the show, really,
yes,
dealing with
yeah,
millions and millions of tiny decisions all the time. And your subconscious is running all the automated systems in your body, so your heartbeat, your breathing, your
yeah.
digestion, all those things.
Absolutely. And that
But it's
fight,
also,
fright, flight mode as well, we can put
exactly, it's
ourselves
also
into a lot.
controlling all of those emotional responses.
Yeah.
So, what often look like kind of on the surface physical symptoms can have a much deeper, as you just alluded to, kind of
Mm.
issues that may have occurred a long time ago, beliefs and behaviors and thoughts that have been imprinted, many, many
Yeah.
moons ago, that you are replaying out as just automatic habits. And
Yeah.
that's the wonderful thing about your subconscious, that, once you've programmed in something, it just runs it on autopilot.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
helps
if
to
it's
shift those beliefs as well.
exactly,
Yeah.
but if it's not helpful, a not helpful thought or an unhelpful behavior or an unhelpful emotion or memory of a situation, then unless you address that, you're going to continue.
Continue believing that, and that's what
Yeah,
your body's going to
exactly.
believe. And the
Exactly.
mind body connection, we've talked about this a lot on previous podcast episodes, but the mind body connection is so
Yeah,
huge. And
exactly.
with anything, it's they don't work in isolation, they work together.
Yeah,
And both have to be, the physical and the emotional all have to be working, synchronized
exactly.
together.
Exactly.
So in for fertility, something like worrying about persistent worrying, will I ever be the mother that I've always dreamt of being? Or, I've got irregular cycles. That means I'm not going to fall pregnant easily. Or, is my body capable of holding a baby? Maybe they feel they're
Yeah,
too slim or they're too fat. Or my diet hasn't. So all those sorts of fertility issues that somebody might be holding on to, those
yeah,
can be addressed and unblocked and dealt
absolutely.
with, can't they, through
Yeah,
through hypnotherapy?
exactly. Because, often the way your body is performing is driven by how you're thinking and feeling. And, those repetitive beliefs and thoughts and feelings can really change, your body chemistry, your stress
Absolutely.
response, etc. So, the subconscious doesn't really distinguish between what's real and
Real,
imagined.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
if you are telling yourself those stories, then really what your subconscious is trying to do is prove you right and
mhm,
give you the evidence to support your beliefs. And so
absolutely.
it will find every way it can to kind of give you that and say, there you go,
Yeah.
your
So
body's
we want the
broken.
subconscious and the conscious to be working like together, don't we? We don't want there to be a
Exactly.
conflict of
Yes,
thoughts,
exactly.
thought patterns, beliefs, and behaviors. Absolutely. So in
Okay.
terms of now specifically, I think we're moving on because of the podcast that this is to talk about fertility.
Yeah.
How do you see hypnotherapy supporting women or couples even on this journey? It's not just about necessarily the women. It's there's two to tango, as they say.
Yeah. Completely.
And obviously, fertility journeys are more challenging, are really emotionally taxing.
Mm. Yeah.
The mind is in a state of that stress, and the body often follows. And we know, stress can create those negative hormones. So hypnotherapy, when I do it with my clients, helps to release the stress, the
Mm.
fear, and the trauma,
Completely.
especially if they've been trying for so long or if they've had miscarriages. So, are you able to talk a little bit more about how you see hypnotherapy supporting fertility
Yeah.
journeys
I
specifically?
mean, it really is a supportive tool. I think you
Mm,
said it all there, really, and actually at every step of that journey. So I can imagine that, you might use it as a sort of foundation, for some clients and couples who are about to embark on that journey.
yeah,
It's a bit like a nutritionist might sort of try and say to you, right, eat these more of this,
yeah,
discard that, change this. So you can start to do some of that kind of emotional rebalancing, decluttering, if you like, some of
decolor,
the
yeah.
negative
And
thoughts.
working on those deep-seated beliefs about, worthiness and
Yeah,
identity.
exactly, exactly. So preparing people for that journey as well,
Mm,
bringing bringing that inner strength and that mindset, and also gathering new resources, new internal resources that they may be lacking,
Yeah.
or they may have, bits of slightly disordered thinking or whatever. So you can just kind of reframe those things and set them up for the best, journey
But
possible.
yeah,
And
it's
then
all about getting the body and the mind ready. It's not.
absolutely,
I always talk to my clients. It's a jigsaw piece. It's not just about
yeah,
one element. It's to complete the jigsaw. You need to have all the pieces in the right place, and
absolutely.
that could be the physical, your diet, and your mental as well. And however it's best to help unblock those blocks.
So
It's
important,
yeah,
yeah. And I think, people kind of understand the concept of stress and anxiety, but they don't really think about their mindset per
yeah.
se. And they do all the other things, or take all the vitamins and the nutrients and all the stuff, eat properly and look after themselves, but they don't really think about the mind.
No. So maybe elaborate a little bit about beliefs because we all have those inner thoughts,
Yeah,
those subconscious thoughts, but actually, as we say, the mind doesn't know real to not real thoughts. But beliefs and things like, well, for my fertility clients, often, my body is broken or
yeah.
something like I'm not meant to be a mother or I'm never going to have children. So, can you just touch upon the power of beliefs and how they can actually work against us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said, that the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what you're thinking and what's really happening. So the more you repeat those beliefs to yourself,
Yeah.
the more it looks for ways to demonstrate that to you. And obviously, deep emotions like fear and guilt and shame and etc can really trigger the stress response and put you into that fight or flight mode. And we know from studies that that can mess around with your hormones and cortisol
Absolutely. Or
levels.
the cortisol. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the physical impact of that kind of thinking, but also subconsciously, if you're having those thoughts like, I'm not destined to be a mother, there's this
Mhm.
inner conflict. So there's this
Yes.
part, and we use this concept in, as you'll know, Laura, in hypnotherapy as parts therapy. So we all have
Yep.
different parts of us, different
Hmm.
parts of us that want to do different things. So there's a part of you that really, really, really wants to be a mother, but maybe there's a part of you that thinks my body won't be able to handle
Yeah.
this, or I don't deserve this,
Yeah.
or if I'm a mother, I'm going to lose my identity. And so that inner conflict as well also is
That
destabilizing.
creates a
And
huge challenge. Yeah.
yeah, and your subconscious then doesn't really know where to go because one part of you is telling it to do this and another part of you is telling it to do that. And actually it will almost the most emotive thought will win out. So if
Absolutely.
you're more frightened than you are excited,
That's the
your
frightened bit is going to
subconscious
be,
will
yeah.
tap into that
Yeah.
and, deliver that for you. So
Absolutely.
you really need to
And you
understand
need to
that.
balance it as well because if the nervous system stays on hyper alert the whole time, that's
Yeah,
going to raise stress levels, cortisol levels, and that disrupts hormones such as progesterone and
yeah,
estrogen, and
yeah,
that can affect things like ovulation. It can
yes,
affect things like embryo quality and implantation. So if you're
yeah,
going through an assisted treatment, that it's really important that we reduce those levels of stress and keep the nervous system, at a steady
operating.
level.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
So, and if you're giving yourself those subconscious messages through those inner beliefs or lifelong beliefs, it's going to really have a huge impact.
Yeah. And I think so many people don't realize that that's what's happening underneath.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
understand the I'm not getting pregnant or something's not quite right, but they don't necessarily know why that might be happening.
Yeah,
And, hypnotherapy can really give you some insight there. It can help you really tap into what's going on. And as you said earlier, maybe there's an unconscious thought or behavior that's happened. You may not have had a fantastic upbringing yourself. Your mother may not have been the
absolutely.
perfect mother. And
Yeah,
so there's an anxiety there about, will I be a good mother? So your subconscious is always, always, always
always
working to
working.
protect you.
Yeah.
There's always a positive intent behind what it's doing, but it doesn't always get the update, get the memo that
Yes.
you've
Yeah. That
changed.
can often get lost in the in
Yeah,
the cabinet
exactly.
there. Yeah,
Exactly. So
absolutely.
hypnotherapy can help you kind of go back to maybe some of the intent that your subconscious is trying to protect you with, and you can get rid of that outdated program, update it, and create a new way of responding. So that
It's
can help.
rewiring, isn't it, of the thought pattern?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which is really important. And also can help possibly, well, I know not possibly, it can help with women who have had irregular cycles as well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
again, by reducing that stress level,
Yeah.
it can help return the body into a more regular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also there's that anticipation, expected behavior. Is like you expect your cycle to be
Mm-hmm.
irregular.
Yeah.
And again, your subconscious will do whatever it can, help your body do whatever it can to deliver that. So,
Absolutely.
you can kind of start to work on that as well.
And I always like to talk about, often people who have been trying and perhaps have given up trying or paused trying, go away on holiday and their mind is totally relaxed. They're not thinking about it. It's not
Yeah.
becoming an obsessive thought that, and bang, they fall
Bang.
pregnant.
Exactly.
It's not a coincidence.
Classic.
That is a classic
Yeah.
example of how, when your mind is at ease and everything else follows on, it flows naturally.
Exactly. Yeah,
Brilliant.
I mean it's the law of reversed effort, I think, or something along those lines, where a bit like sleeping, the harder you try to fall asleep, the less
Mm,
likely you are, because your conscious mind comes into play. And actually, when you relax and you allow your conscious mind to drift off and your subconscious mind to take over, normally things just start going according to
yeah.
plan. So,
Yeah.
yeah, people are
Amazing.
trying too hard sometimes, and that just
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, what kind of changes have you seen in your clients? Not necessarily fertility. I appreciate you. I've probably done more work
yeah.
with fertility, but just generally after sort of this mindset shift work, what would you say your most kind of changes you've seen?
I mean, it's very, very varied, but at the
Yeah.
same time, everybody reports feeling more balanced,
Yes. Yeah.
more relaxed, lighter. There's almost a physical
Like a
weight.
weight, a cloud has been lifted out of their soul, sort of
Exactly,
thing.
off the
Yeah.
shoulders, and just sort of suddenly a bit more connected with themselves.
Hmm.
I think the most dramatic changes that I've seen, I work a lot in people with chronic pain, so
Right.
mind body condition, so where the person has been living with chronic pain for longer than 3 months, sometimes decades,
Wow.
where the condition or original injury that they may have sustained has healed, where their doctor says we can't find anything structurally wrong to explain your symptoms, or these symptoms seem to be more painful and more distressing than they should be.
Hmm.
There's often a mind body connection there. So some level of initial sensitizing event that's happened
Yeah.
where, for example, something very emotional happened at the same time as something physical happening. So an example might be a child falling off their bike when they're 5 and fracturing their skull,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and hearing the doctor say to the parent they must not move or they might die.
Die. Yeah. That's
That,
going to hold on to their, yeah, it's going
yeah,
to stay with them.
this is
That's
your
a very
subconscious
trauma.
mind. Your subconscious mind says, okay, extreme movement, death, I
Yeah.
need to be careful of that. And
Yeah.
so these people can live a life of restricted movement and pain.
Because they're worried that it's going to lead to something that they've been told
Yes, they don't
many
know
years.
that.
They don't know that.
Well, their
Absolutely.
subconscious mind is protecting them. So,
Yeah.
yeah, seeing that in one session, seeing that pain literally
Yeah.
diminish or completely disappear is just amazing. And I'm just so astonished every time it
Mm.
happens. But yeah,
Amazing.
even just removing a limiting belief from somebody who's desperate to move forward with their life, wants to achieve, but really feels like they can't for some whatever reason, and
Mm.
helping them understand that and removing that and changing that behavior that's life changing.
Judging. Absolutely. And with my
Removing
clients, with I've often the clients come to me who are having an assisted fertility journey. Not
yeah,
always, but a lot of them generally are going through IVF.
yeah,
And so, which means they've had some kind of a journey before getting to me, and they're, deeply exhausted, overwhelmed, you name it, the emotions are all running wild.
yeah,
And so I've found, along with my EFT that I sometimes do, depending on the clients and what they want and I feel that they need, we do hypnotherapy just to rebuild that sense of hope
yeah,
and to address the grief and disappointment or the anger that they
yeah,
might have come to me with. So it's important we release that to begin with, to almost open up the pathways, to be open for the subconscious mind to then accept and
yes,
embrace the new changes.
yeah,
um,
exactly.
and
It's
then
so
also
important.
and also with unexplained infertility as well, which can be really challenging because people like answers. People like to know the
Yeah,
reason, and when there's not a reason and everything on the surface or even underneath the surface seems to be absolutely fine medically, it's like,
yes,
well, what's wrong with me? Is often
yeah,
what my clients will say. Well, why me? What have I done to deserve this?
yeah,
And
yeah,
again, it's the hypnotherapy has a huge part to play in helping them to understand, dealing with the subconscious mind as well, creating that emotional reset so they
Yeah.
can move forward.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just about accepting the situation. As you say, sometimes it is unexplained and there may not be some emotional trauma or
No,
some big thing that's holding them back. It just is the way, unfortunately, it is. And actually learning to accept that and move on, and also know that that is not your identity.
no,
That
no.
you can still be you can still do all the things you want to do, and just kind of learning to accept and live with that reality can
Absolutely.
be
So
really sort of, powerful for people. It sounds like it's not a solution, but it is a solution to be able to live with that
yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of work with that with my clients. I also do a lot of work just during the assisted treatment stages. So, when they've got to start the treatment, during the suppression stage, during the egg retrieval, the
Yeah,
embryo collection and embryo transfer, and then post. So, we've sort of got like a little course of hypnotherapy
perfect.
guidance that we do to take
Yeah,
them along that journey with them, along with things like manifestations and visualizations. Really,
perfect.
really important.
Yeah,
And then I've
absolutely.
got the clients also that have had pregnancy losses, whether that's been
Mhm.
after an assisted fertility treatment or natural pregnancy losses, and they're now struggling. So
Yeah,
again, it's a really great way to connect with the spirit of the baby.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
can help bring peace. It's in really emotional, deep emotional work and empowering, because after a pregnancy loss, sometimes people think they just want to move on and put it behind them, and it's a story that they don't want to address, but
yeah.
that in itself brings trauma, and sometimes
Does.
it's about connecting and just accepting and then being able to move on.
Yeah, you're not going to erase what's happened, but you can help someone carry it differently.
Absolutely.
Carry,
Reframe
yeah,
the story.
yeah, carry the weight, but more lightly, and kind of allow that to be with you rather than define you or swamp you, really.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So it has a huge power.
I can see how that's super helpful for your clients. I imagine it must be, fantastic extra support to have on that journey for them.
Absolutely. It can often be the game changer.
Yeah.
It's like an incredible, deep, empowering way of working with the mind that's really important for them. And I'm not saying other things, other modalities like I've talked about before, acupuncture and reflexology. They all sort of are quite physical and work, although it's more about what they do to use helps you sort of balance the
Yes.
inner self. But this is more hypnotherapy really taps into more of the mind, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I think just again giving you that slight sense of insight and that you're connected with yourself and your thoughts,
Yeah.
and actually helping people recognize the thoughts that they might be having and the feelings that they're having, and just allowing them to be, and then acknowledge them and then let them pass, because it's
Absolutely.
the ruminating on it that is the thing that keeps that habit going and keeps
Yeah.
that thought going. So
Mm.
yeah, lots of self.
Amazing. Well, that's really, really been an incredible chat with you, Melissa. Really inspiring, really informative. For anyone out there who's listening, obviously, I am a fertility coach and offer I'm a trained hypnotherapist as well as an EFT practitioner and an NLP life coach. And Melissa is a hypnotherapist. And if anyone's out there wanting to connect with Melissa, how's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Best way at the moment is on my Instagram account, which is Belief Dynamics,
Hmm.
or to email me on melissa@beliefdynamics.co.uk. My website will be up soon, and something that your listeners might be interested in, I'm running some group hypnotherapy workshops, starting
Oh,
with one
wow.
supercharged by motherhood, uh,
Ah,
which is aimed at women going back to work after having their babies. So really helping
right.
them bring all the powers that motherhood gives them back into the workplace. So yeah, looking.
Fantastic. Hopefully, some of my listeners will be wanting that as well. If
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. And obviously, I am Laura, founder of Fertility Avenue. You can find me at fertility.avenue on Instagram. But in the meantime, is there anything else, Melissa, before we wrap up the podcast for today that you would like to add in to the
No, I mean,
conversation?
just I'm just in awe of your your clients and what the work that you do. You know, it's so important to help women and couples on this, you know,
Yeah.
incredible journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think if anyone listening can take from this that hypnotherapy has so many applications,
Absolutely.
and actually anything that they may be worrying about or have challenges with, then, you know, reaching out to a registered hypnotherapist
Hypnotherapist is going to be
super
really
helpful.
helpful. Absolutely. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Melissa,
Oh,
for sharing your wisdom and your heart today. This has been,
lovely.
well, a nourishing conversation, to say the very least.
Lovely.
And just to my listeners, remind you that your mind is not separate from your body. They work together. Healing happens on all levels. So until next time, take care of yourself and give yourself that much needed self-love, self-respect, and attention. Bye for now.